She started going crazy and just jumping all over the place in the back of the truck. I couldn't really control her. And she fell off through the window. I slammed the truck in the park and jumped out. And she got up off the ground and started running.
What did you do then?
I took a knife in my back pocket and I slit her throat.
16-year-old exchange student Silvina Peloso is set to return to her home country of Argentina in about 2 weeks' time. Caring for her during her time in the U.S. has been 42-year-old Carol Sund, a lifelong friend of her mother's and Carol's 15-year-old daughter, Julie, who Silvina has grown very close with during her stay. As a farewell gift to Silvina, Carol and Julie plan a trip to one of their favorite places on Earth, Yosemite National Park, where they hope to provide her with memorable experiences and an overdose of natural beauty before her departure. Valentine's Day, 1999, El Portal, California. The trio arrive at the Cedar Lodge just outside of Yosemite in the late afternoon. They are checked into room 509 in the otherwise vacant 500 building, which is as far as you can get from the main lobby and restaurant area. After settling in and getting a good night's sleep, Carol, Julie, and Silvina arise early and ready themselves for their day among Yosemite's breathtaking granite cliffs, towering waterfalls, and pristine alpine meadows. Bundled against the cold, they immerse themselves fully in the experience, taking in the awe-inspiring sights, ice skating, having spontaneous snowball fights, and visiting souvenir shops. Nearly spent upon their return to the Cedar Lodge that night, Julie and Silvina rent a video from the front desk, and they all enjoy dinner at the on-site restaurant before finally retiring to their room. While watching their movie and winding down for sleep, they are startled by an abrupt knock at the door. Carol approaches cautiously and cracks the door open, leaving the chain lock on. The man standing on the other side announces himself as lodge maintenance and, pointing upward, informs her that there's a flood in the room above. He needs to come in and inspect their bathroom. Carol has him wait outside while she goes to check the bathroom, returning quickly and indicating that there is no issue. The man persists, however, stating that if he is unable to check for himself, they will have to be moved to another room. Reluctant, Carol lets him in. He proceeds to the bathroom and begins inspecting the ceiling. Relaxing somewhat as the man goes about his work, time suddenly stops for Carol, Julie, and Silvina when he re-enters the main room holding a gun. He tells them that he wants their money and their vehicle and that no one will be harmed if they cooperate. They are ordered to lie face down on their beds. Once they comply, the man herds young Julie and Silvina into the bathroom, threatening them with his gun and imploring them to stay put. Returning to the main room, he binds Carol with duct tape and proceeds to strangle her with a length of rope. Once certain that she is no longer breathing, he wraps her in a pink blanket from one of the beds, carries her outside, and places her lifeless body into the trunk of her own red Pontiac. The man re-enters the bathroom and grabs Julie, the seemingly less defiant of the two girls, and brings her to the adjacent room 510, where he again threatens her with his gun and leaves her in the bathroom. Back in room 509, he drags Silvina to the nearest bed and proceeds to SA her. Afterwards, with Silvina continuing to fight him desperately, he wraps his rope around her throat. His knuckles burn and his fingers go numb as he slowly strangles the life from her. He bundles her body in another blanket and carries her outside where he lays her beside Carol in the trunk. The man then hurriedly tidies the room, doing his best to bag any potential evidence for disposal. Realizing that sunrise is approaching, he revisits Julie in room 510 and SAs the teenaged girl. He then tells her that they're going somewhere together and assures her that she will not be harmed. Unaware of the grim fates of her mother and her friend, Julie complies. The man binds her hands and feet with duct tape, gags her, and wraps another pink motel blanket around her. He then rushes her into the red Pontiac and drives away, not yet certain where he will go or exactly what he will do with his final victim. This photo was taken only about 20 minutes before the man knocked on their door. Carol's husband, Jens, though unable to reach his wife via cell phone, shows up to the San Francisco International Airport where they were scheduled to meet for her return with the girls. When they don't arrive on their flight, he reports them as missing. Police promptly begin a search of the El Portal area but come up with no immediate leads. News coverage quickly erupts with the story of 3 missing women as what would be the largest ever search effort in the national park's history is launched. After a month of intensive searching on the part of police and volunteer services, a man out on a hike stumbles upon a burned-out car in the woods about 80 miles outside of Yosemite. He quickly reports his findings to the local police. The vehicle has been burned to such a degree that no paint, rubber, plastic, or upholstery remained. In the trunk of the car, authorities discover 2 unidentifiable bodies partly turned to ash. They also locate some undamaged evidence surrounding the vehicle, including rental car keys, a CD player, shoes, and most importantly, a disposable camera. While the bodies retrieved from the trunk are examined by a forensic pathologist, agents from the FBI, who are by now involved in the case, have the film from the camera developed. What they see are about 20 photos of Carol Sund, Julie Sund, and Silvina Peloso enjoying a day at Yosemite. Soon thereafter, the bodies in the trunk are identified as those of Carol and Silvina. Obviously devastated by the news, their families, along with the community at large, hold out hope that Julie might still be found alive. Working outward from the location of the vehicle, search teams begin scouring the seemingly endless woods. While the frantic search continues, authorities receive a cryptic letter bearing no return address. The letter reads, quote, "We had fun with this one," and includes a crude drawing of the Don Pedro Reservoir, which is located about 40 miles from where the vehicle had been found. A search team reports to the area with a cadaver dog and quickly locates the body of Julie Sund on a scenic overlook. She is wrapped in a pink blanket, her ankles are bound with duct tape, and her arms are neatly folded on her chest. Her throat has been slashed to within mere inches of decapitation. Carol's wallet insert is soon found, quite inexplicably, at a busy residential intersection in Modesto, California, more than 90 miles from Yosemite. FBI agents begin rounding up fugitives and parolees in the area in hopes of apprehending the criminal or criminals responsible, and soon come to believe that they have the 2 individuals in their custody. It is then reported to the public that they need not fear for their safety any longer. Yosemite is safe again. The Sund and Peloso families make an agonizing journey to the spot where the remains of Carol and Silvina's bodies had been recovered. Upon arriving, they are met with the sight of a roadside shrine for their lost loved ones, covered with flowers and cards from anonymous sympathizers. They then visit the location where Julie Sund's young life had ended. They hold their own ceremony at each location, lay down wildflowers, and pray for the souls of their dearly departed. By the summer of 1999, with about 5 months having passed since the murders, the tourists have returned and things at Yosemite are finally getting back to normal. Unfortunately, the community is made aware that they have again been visited by evil when a 26-year-old naturalist who'd been living in the park goes missing under very suspicious circumstances. Joey Armstrong, a devoted environmentalist, had taken a job with the Yosemite Institute in December of 1998 and moved into a small house in an area of the park called Foresta, which is situated in a secluded alpine valley. At the time of her disappearance, she lived in the house with her boyfriend, but he happened to be away. In his absence, Joey had planned a trip to visit a friend. When she failed to show up, her friend called to initiate a search for her. A supervisor from the Yosemite Institute arrives at the house that night and finds the stereo on, the front and back doors ajar, and Joey's partially packed Toyota Tacoma parked outside. The following morning, a member of the Yosemite Fire Department reports having seen a white and powder blue International Scout parked not far from the house the previous night. Another report then comes in from a Yosemite employee who'd picked up a male hitchhiker standing beside the same vehicle on a highway just outside of the park and drove him to the Cedar Lodge in El Portal where he claimed to live. As a be-on-the-lookout alert is issued by police for the vehicles spotted at the crime scene, a park search team comes upon something bobbing in the water, partially submerged in the stream that ran beside Joey's house. Upon closer inspection, they discover that it's the decapitated body of a young woman. and her body bore defensive wounds indicating a violent fight to live. Assuming that these are the remains of Joey Armstrong, but unable to say so with certainty, they continue to search for the young woman's head. 2 Sheriff's Department detectives soon locate the International Scout at Merced River, not far from El Portal. Moving through the woods, they eventually come upon a man casually sunbathing in the nude and smoking a joint. After confiscating his marijuana, they question the man, whose name is Cary Stayner. He informs them that he works as a handyman at the Cedar Lodge and that he'd not been in the Foresta area in recent days. He readily allows them to search his truck, but resists when they ask to inspect his backpack. When the detectives indicate that they will take the backpack and obtain a search warrant for it, Cary relents. In the bag, they find a Polaroid camera, an X-Acto knife, a harmonica, a beer, and rolling papers. Tucked into a separate compartment, they also find a paperback book titled Black Lightning. They take his backpack and snap a few photographs of his truck before leaving. As a side note, Black Lightning is a horror suspense novel that includes grotesque depictions of a brutal, sadistic serial killer attacking and killing women. It reads like a preposterous yet skillfully contrived and absorbing blueprint for serial murder. Back at Yosemite, about 40 feet from where Joey Armstrong's body had been found, authorities locate the young woman's head in a watery bed beside the stream. In her house, they find materials that indicate that the assailant had at least attempted to SA her. Finally, they lift fingerprints from Joey's truck and create plaster casts of footprints and a set of tire tracks. Detectives from the FBI then revisited the Cedar Lodge. They'd initially been there after the disappearance of Carol and Julie Sund and Silvina Peloso to question the staff. At that time, management had tasked handyman Cary Stayner with assisting them and granting them access to all areas of the premises that needed to be searched. On this visit, they find Cary in his apartment above the restaurant where they question him further. Detectives now begin to have their doubts about Cary, who'd not raised a red flag with them to this point. But without a search warrant or probable cause, they are forced to move on to questioning other potential suspects at the lodge. Shortly thereafter, a Yosemite tracking specialist compares the casts of the tire tracks taken outside of Joey Armstrong's house to the photos police had taken of the tires on Cary Stayner's truck. Concluding that they're a definitive match, investigators return once more to the Cedar Lodge the following day with the intent of bringing Cary into the station. This time, however, they do not find him there. In the community, people are beginning to fear that there may be a serial killer stalking the deep, wooded grounds of their beloved Yosemite National Park. Cary Stayner's story, in a public sense, actually begins with the story of his younger brother. Stephen Stayner, a 7-year-old boy from Merced, California, was abducted in December of 1972 by a convicted offender named Kenneth Parnell. Parnell lured Stephen into his car and, over the next 7 years, brainwashed, manipulated, sedated, and abused him. Convincing Stephen that his parents had given him up, Parnell raised him as his son under the name of Dennis Parnell. By early 1980, with Stephen apparently aging out of usefulness, Parnell kidnapped another boy, 5-year-old Timothy White. Refusing to let another child endure what he had suffered, Stephen escaped with Timothy 2 weeks later and led him to safety. When police asked him who he was, Stephen uttered the words that would become famous, quote, "I know my first name is Stephen." Those words would serve as the title of a book, as well as a 1989 television miniseries detailing his disturbing ordeal. Reunited with his family, Stephen found readjusting to his previous life quite challenging after so much time under Parnell's dysfunctional control. Despite his struggles, he was seen as a hero and became a symbol of courage and survival whose story brought national awareness to child abduction. Tragically, while still attempting to get his life together, Stephen died in a motorcycle accident in 1989 at just 24 years old. Present in the Stayner home through this entire ordeal was Stephen's older brother, Cary. Born on August 13, 1961 to Delbert and Kay Stayner, he grew up in a working-class home characterized more by routine than by warmth. When Stephen disappeared, 10-year-old Cary would walk outside and gaze into the night sky until he found what he considered to be his lucky star. He would then prey upon it for his brother's safe return home. He'd never shared as close a relationship with his parents, particularly with his father, as Stephen had, and eventually came to believe that his father saw Stephen as his real son, which left him to struggle with feelings of abandonment and neglect. As time passed without Stephen's return, the Stayner family dynamic eroded dramatically. Kay, already known to be emotionally reserved, essentially shut down, and Delbert remained inconsolable for years, losing his job as a result, but both clung to a belief that their son was still alive. When Stephen finally returned home and his story was told, Cary, who was 18 at the time, had a very difficult time with the homosexual aspect of his brother's experience with Kenneth Parnell. Their Mormon community regarded such activity as blasphemy, and Cary felt compelled to help cure his brother by helping him to find and bed as many women as possible. He even wrote Stephen a, quote, slut list populated with the names of local girls he believed to be easy targets. Stephen's return also marked the point at which Cary began to fade into the background of his family. He was jealous of the attention his brother received, but would curiously leverage it for his own benefit at times, often introducing himself as Stephen Stayner's brother. He was also jealous of the behaviors Stephen was now allowed to get away with, behaviors Cary could never have expected to receive the same leniency for. He believed that no one cared about him or what he did. After all, his brother was a hero. What could he possibly do to be noticed? These feelings would fester in Cary as he grew increasingly misanthropic, retreating into his resentment and isolating himself. At Merced High School, Cary, already relatively unpopular, became the kid whose younger brother had been kidnapped and was missing for years. Though he'd been voted most creative in his senior class and recognized as a talented cartoonist, he remained quiet and introverted. He merely observed his peers from beneath the brim of his baseball hat, a hat he wore at all times in public. Having suffered from trichotillomania, a disorder that caused him to compulsively pull his hair out from the age of 3, he wore the hat to conceal it. He never had girlfriends, yet he objectified women, and it was during this period that he began giving life to fantasies he had nurtured within for years. Cary repeatedly exposed himself to his sister's friends, disturbing all who became aware of the behavior, and driving himself deeper into a world in which no one could relate to him. Cary's uncle Jerry owned a business called C&S Glass and gave him a job as a window installer. Jerry, though, also believed in Cary's abilities as an artist and wanted to help him get into art school. Cary eventually went to live with his uncle, where he did not pursue art school but indulged excessively in marijuana and began to rebel against his Mormon religion and pretty much everything else. While throwing a party in his uncle's absence on one occasion, Cary exposed some of his inner turmoil and further alienated himself from his peers in the process. As he focused quite creepily on one of the only 2 women at the party, who happened to be drunk and out of control, he repeatedly implored his guests not to make a mess. His requests were ignored, and when the girl he'd been fixating on mentioned having sex with 2 other guys on the makeshift dance floor in his uncle's living room, Cary snapped. Without another word, he disappeared into the bedroom and re-emerged with a pair of nunchucks. He furiously attacked one of the guys the girl had been talking to, then began to choke him. Shocked and believing that Cary intended to kill his friend, a partygoer pushed Cary off of him and pulled out a knife. When Cary, still seething, reached for the knife and sliced his hand, things were finally broken up. The consensus after this incident was that Cary, always described as quiet and shy to this point, had apparently become a reckless, violent asshole. In 1990, Cary's Uncle Jerry was murdered while home one day on his lunch break. Someone broke into his home and shot him 3 times, once in the chest and twice in the head, with his own gun before stealing his wallet and driving off in his company truck. Cary, when interviewed by a local newspaper, said, quote, "I think it was just a low-life bum who was in town and didn't have any money and was caught in the act." He told them about a drifter who'd been picking oranges in their front yard days earlier and drew a composite sketch of the supposed perpetrator that actually ran in that same newspaper. There were no signs of a struggle in the home, but there was a hole in Jerry's hand indicating that he'd seen his killer and attempted to shield his face before being shot. Quite interestingly, his truck was located within 24 hours, parked at the same intersection from which Stephen Stayner had been abducted 18 years earlier. Though the case would remain unsolved, many believed that Cary had killed his uncle. Cary essentially disappeared after this incident. He rarely saw his family, and he lost touch with the few friends he'd had. Still reporting for work at his late uncle's glass company, he became irate with the current owner on one occasion. Finding Cary punching a wooden plank in the warehouse with bloody fists, a coworker asked him what was wrong, to which he replied that he wanted to drive a truck through the boss's office, jump out, and kill everyone there. Following this incident, and believing that he was experiencing a nervous breakdown, Cary was encouraged to seek mental health treatment, but upon being referred to group therapy, he refused to attend. He had a troublingly apparent anger issue, but with his aimlessness and emotional ineptitude, he would certainly find no productive outlet for it. Rather than dealing with his mental health issues directly, Cary, very much a lost soul, at the age of 36, decided to leave his hometown in search of solitude. He found employment as a handyman at the Cedar Lodge in El Portal and moved into a room above the on-site restaurant. Nearly all of his free time was spent in the isolated depths of Yosemite National Park, where he was able to exist free and unjudged as he habitually smoked weed and sunbathed in the nude. It was also there, in the seclusion of the park, that Cary claimed to have begun encountering Bigfoot. The beast became a fixation for him moving forward, and he spoke of his encounters often. Amidst patterns of bizarre thought that were dominating his inner life and distorting his perception of reality, Cary may very well have felt a kinship with the beast, two hidden presences moving about the vast primordial wilderness. Prior to FBI agents arriving at the Cedar Lodge, Cary had packed up and driven 2 hours north to a nudist colony called Laguna del Sol. He pitched a tent outside and went into the bar, where he spoke with an older woman, sharing with her that things were not going so well for him and that he had decided to travel north on a whim. That same woman would see a news report the following day and call police to report their interaction. A day later, while sitting in a resort restaurant reading a newspaper, Cary sees 2 agents walk in. He calmly sets his newspaper down, stands, and raises his hands in submission. Told that he is not under arrest and that they simply want to bring him in for questioning, he accompanies them willingly. After a lengthy ride to the FBI field office, they settle into an interview room and eat some pizza. Out of the blue, Cary remarks flippantly that this will be his last meal as a free man. When they inquire as to his meaning, he says that he can give them, quote, closure as to the murder of Joey Armstrong, and more. He has a condition, though, that floors the agents. Cary wants to see child pornography, and not just a few photos. He wants access to a large quantity. Biding time, they agree to present his request to their superiors and see what they can do. With this, Cary again surprises them when he begins discussing the murder without any further prodding. He does so calmly and completely without emotion. On July 21, 1999, Cary had driven his International Scout into Yosemite along a little-known back road to a place where he claimed to have seen Bigfoot and spent some time wandering the alpine meadow. While throwing rocks into a creek, he sees Joey Armstrong loading bags into a Toyota Tacoma beside a small greenhouse. Evil had simply met with opportunity in this moment. Not having been in search of a victim, Cary instantly switched modes, retrieved his murder kit from his truck, and returned to initiate casual conversation with Joey. He soon mentions his Bigfoot sighting and begins looking into the house beyond her to see if anyone else is there. Seeing no one, he pulls out his gun, aims it at her head, and orders her into the rear bedroom of the house, where he binds and gags her with duct tape. Joey fights him fiercely, and Cary is just barely able to physically overcome her. He then takes her outside, tosses her into the back seat of his truck, and drives off. As he drives away from the cabin with Joey bound in the back seat, she begins going crazy, as he puts it, kicking violently and throwing herself against the doors. Somehow, she forces her restrained body through a half-opened window and flees into the woods. In disbelief, Cary slams on the brakes, flings the truck door open, and chases her. When he catches up and grabs hold of Joey near the stream behind her house, he begins strangling her, then retrieves his knife from his back pocket and viciously slits her throat. During all of this, he claims, he is being driven by voices in his head beckoning him to kill. He then severs her head, dumps her body into the stream, and places her head at a separate location beside the stream. The FBI agents obviously do not grant Cary his request for the CP, but they are able to goad him into expounding on the quote more he'd mentioned to them earlier. Cary continues. While out walking the grounds of the Cedar Lodge back on the night of February 15th, he spotted a red Pontiac in the parking lot of the remote 500 building. Seeing through the room's open curtains that the occupants were a woman and 2 young girls, he decided to put the fantasies he'd had since he was a child into action. He confesses here that his first violent fantasy had occurred during a shopping trip with his mother when he was 7 years old. As he watched the checkout girls work, he imagined tying them up, assaulting and killing them. He'd been harboring and struggling with such fantasies since that time. When he left the Cedar Lodge with Julie Sund in the passenger seat and the bodies of Carol and Sylvina in the trunk that night, Cary drove west for about an hour before stopping at a parking area at Don Pedro Reservoir. He carried Julie as a groom carries his bride out to the scenic overlook. There he essayed her again, and then he slit her throat. But Julie did not lose consciousness and bleed out quickly. At first panicking in disbelief, she then writhed in unimaginable pain as the mind-rending reality of the situation set in on her. Somehow accepting her inescapable fate, Julie gestured for Cary to kill her with his gun, pointing her forefinger and thumb to her temple. Without emotion, he stood over her, watching her, and revealed that the gun was never loaded. He eventually lifted her up and slashed her throat again, this time much more savagely, very nearly beheading her. He laid Julie down on the pink blanket he had wrapped her in at the Cedar Lodge, crossed her arms over her chest, and left her in a clump of poison oak. Disturbingly, Cary calmly took some time to appreciate the beautiful view from the overlook before fleeing the scene. With the bodies of Carol Sund and Sylvina Peloso still in the trunk, he drove the red Pontiac until he spotted a logging road and followed it into the woods. He eventually got out and pushed the car, hoping to reach a nearby body of water, but the vehicle got stuck on a tree stump only a few hundred feet from the highway. Forced to abandon the car there, he then walked down the highway until he found a payphone in Sierra Village and called a cab. During the long ride back to the Cedar Lodge, Cary asked the driver if she believed in Bigfoot. When she said that she did not, he told her that she should, and pointed out an area where he claimed to have encountered the elusive beast. Finally, he paid the $170 fare with money he had stolen from Carol's wallet. Returning to room 509 to continue his cover-up, he changed the bed sheets and, to create the appearance of the room occupants having left early without dropping off their key, ran hot water in the shower and left some dampened towels on the bathroom floor. 2 days later, fearing that he'd left potential evidence at the dump site, Cary returned to the red Pontiac, doused it with gasoline, and set it ablaze. He then traveled to Modesto and tossed Carol's wallet insert onto the ground with the intent of misleading police. Prior to retaining legal counsel, Cary readily agreed to take FBI agents to the scenes of his crimes and demonstrate the details of his actions. He also told them where to find the still bloody knives he had used to kill Joey Armstrong and Julie Sund. These taped reenactments would become the strongest evidence in the prosecution's case against him. Also, prior to retaining an attorney, Cary spoke with a reporter named Ted Rowlands. He had a single condition before giving the interview, however. He wanted Ted to use his industry contacts to get a movie of the week made about him and his story. Unfortunately for Cary, the movie of the week was no longer a thing, and Ted didn't exactly have the contacts Cary seemed to think he did. Attempting to placate him, Ted said that he would do what he could, and Cary opened the floodgates once more, providing detailed confessions to all 4 murders. He also disclosed that he'd learned to fake his handwriting for the letter he sent to the police revealing Julie's whereabouts, and that he'd had someone else lick the envelope to avoid his DNA becoming available to them. Asked if he would have continued killing had he not been caught, Cary said that he was absolutely intent on killing until he got caught or ended his own life. On the morning of August 5, 1999, the grand jury took only about 50 minutes to decide Cary Stayner's fate. He was guilty of the first-degree murder of Joey Armstrong. Quote, "This crime has horrified the community and the nation," proclaimed District Attorney Paul L. Sieve. Quote, "There can be no real solace for the victim's family members, but there will be justice." Cary was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and would soon face the prospect of receiving the death penalty when tried for the killing of Carol and Julie Sund and Silvina Peloso. Against the strong advice of his counsel, Cary continued to grant media interviews from prison as he awaited his second trial. Nearly 3 years later, in July of 2002, the Sund trial finally began. The defense attempted to make the case that Cary was psychotic at the time of the crimes. Several mental health experts testified that he suffered from brain damage that may have led to delusional thinking. It was made clear that Cary had not gotten the treatment that he desperately needed over the course of his life. It was also revealed that there were debilitating issues within the Stayner family that repeated through generations. It was, apparently, a family tree heavily dotted with alcoholism, mental illness, and abuse in many forms. Regardless, the jury, unmoved by the defense's case, handed Cary the death penalty. His life was to end by lethal injection at San Quentin State Prison. A chilling revelation made after the murders was that Carol Sund, Julie Sund, and Silvina Peloso were not Cary's intended targets on February 15th. Soon after getting the handyman job at the Cedar Lodge in 1998, he began dating a waitress who worked at the restaurant below his apartment. The woman had 2 young girls who grew close to Cary over time. They later claimed that he was fun to be around, was always kind, and regularly brought them gifts. Cary being around had been a happy part of their lives, but it would eventually become a very dark and disturbing part. As it turns out, earlier on the same night that Cary murdered Carol, Julie, and Silvina, he had actually intended to kill his girlfriend and her 2 young daughters. While at their apartment, fully prepared to fulfill his longtime fantasy, he was thwarted by the presence of a man working on the grounds of their property. Frustrated and angered, he leaves, and it is then that he goes on the hunt and locates Carol's red Pontiac parked at the Cedar Lodge. When Cary's ex-girlfriend and her 2 daughters learned of his original intentions, they were traumatized. Cary told a reporter after being imprisoned that he wanted to apologize to the families of his victims. A Cary Stayner apology, however, went something like this: "I am sorry their loved ones were where they were when they were there," adding, "I wish I could have controlled myself and not done what I did." His humanity allowed him to apologize only for the happenstance of his victims being in his path while he acted on an insane compulsion that he, of course, was powerless to control. He had no remorse, and this was clear in his words, even when freely choosing to apologize to those he had harmed so irrevocably. In his mind, he was actually a hero of sorts for having resisted his impulses for so long, the urges that he somehow felt were justified by his own suffering and aimlessness, the very things he'd wanted to do since he was a child. Carol and Jens Sund had actually honeymooned at Yosemite after getting married in 1977. It was one of their favorite places on Earth. Carol was a kind, giving woman who sat on the board of the Council on Adoptable Children for more than a decade, and eventually became such a champion for abused and abandoned children that she was selected as a member of a special advocacy program for which she reviewed child welfare records to expose abusive parents as well as negligent or incompetent social workers. Even after her death, she contributed, as her will made generous contributions to 3 child welfare agencies. Her husband told those who asked that to honor his wife, they could contribute to organizations that helped abused and neglected children. Her daughter, Juliana Ruth Sund, was a very bright, talented musician who played the piano and the violin in the city orchestra. Quote, "You could see Julie coming at you from a mile away," her friend said. "She was so happy all the time, always smiling." After her death, her hometown turned out for the first of 3 memorials held in her honor, at which poems she'd written were displayed on large screen monitors, along with photos commemorating her life, her relationship with her mother, and her friendship with Silvina. Silvina Peloso had planned to study biology at a university in Argentina after her return from the US. She was a happy and very kind girl who loved roller skating and taking part in dance competitions that she often won. More than 1,000 people packed a cathedral in her family's rural farming town to pay their final respects. During the service, a chaplain prayed that the people of Argentina could, quote, heal from all the pain that has been caused by the loss of this beautiful daughter. Leslie Armstrong recalled her last phone call with her daughter. Joey had confessed to her that she had passed by an accident on the highway without stopping and wanted to know if her mother believed that God would forgive her for doing so. Of course, Leslie replied. Here we get just a flicker of a glimpse into the personality and heart of Joey Armstrong. As her mother called her, quote, her greatest accomplishment, it is very clear that she was a true asset to this world. Someone who cared for others and gave her life away in service of that care rather than simply speaking the words. She was a teacher who took children into the woods and taught them about nature, while on a personal level encouraging them to be independent and strong-willed individuals. She was a joyous free spirit, loved by all who knew her. The Yosemite killer being caught and his reign of terror ending was due in large part to the courage of Joey Armstrong. During his initial interrogation, agents noticed fresh cuts on his hands and arms and speculated that he'd sustained them during his attack on Joey. The messy murder scene that her flustered killer left behind would ultimately spell his doom. For the Stayner family, the dichotomy of raising one son who became a national symbol of courage and survival, and another who would later inflict unimaginable horror, must have turned their lives into a harrowing paradox. The most significant moments in both of their children's lives were life-altering media happenings for them. To endure both the pride of a child the nation hailed as a hero and the devastation of a child who became a serial killer is a burden that no family can possibly be built to carry. Their home, once defined by resilience in the face of trauma, became marked by a dual legacy, one of bravery and one of brutality, each forever shadowing the other. After Cary's arrest, he was investigated for several unsolved murders, including the 1992 decapitation murder of 19-year-old Veronica Martinez, a Sacramento waitress, the 1994 murder of 23-year-old prostitute Sherilyn Murphy, who had also been found decapitated on a mountain road not far from Yosemite, the abduction and murder of a model named Kim Morgan, whose remains were found in the hills outside Santa Barbara, the stabbing death of a woman who was then burned in a barrel at Don Pedro Lake. Close to his parents' home, the abduction case of 15-year-old Vanessa Smith, who had gone missing in Merced less than 3 years prior to Cary's arrest, as well as several other cases that seemed to fit the profile. The fact that he'd confessed to having fantasized about abducting and killing women for 30 years and then actually done it on 2 separate occasions was cause enough for the investigations. It would never be known if he was responsible for these or any other murders, but no further charges have ever been leveled against Cary Stayner. Cary said to the screenwriter of his brother's movie of the week that he didn't need to be loved, quote, that much, referring to the way Stephen was loved, but wondered why he couldn't be loved, quote, a little bit like that. Cary, still in his teens at this point, had already seemed to accept a sense of hopelessness about his life. Many factors obviously contributed to forming him into what he would become, but in the end, his life would read like a long, slow collision between unresolved fantasies, unaddressed wounds, and a reality he could never fully inhabit. Long before Yosemite, before the fear and devastation he caused, Cary lived in the shadow of a story larger than himself. His younger brother's kidnapping, heroic escape, and nationwide attention. While the world celebrated Stephen and mourned his pain, Cary stood just off stage, a child whose own suffering went largely unseen. What formed inside of him wasn't simple resentment, but a deeper, quieter fracture, a belief that he'd been overlooked, displaced, and left to wrestle alone with the dark fantasies that had already taken root in his mind. Diagnosed with bipolar disorder, Cary submitted to taking mood-stabilizing medication, only to abandon it at the first sign of consequence. He claimed not to like how it made him feel. But the primary sticking point for him was that it inhibited his ability to dream. In reality, the medication was very likely diminishing the depths of his treasured fantasies, which was a cost he was unwilling to accept. Cary's fantasies, violent, intrusive, and persistent, were his private universe, a place where he could control that which he could not control in life. Yet he also clung to things that suggested he wanted to believe in mystery, wonder, and escape. His fixation on Bigfoot wasn't just odd curiosity. It was a strange, almost childlike refuge, a symbol of a world beyond the one that had failed him. But the same imagination that reached for monsters in the woods also nurtured the monster growing within him. By the time Cary escaped to Yosemite, his psychological fault lines had already deepened beyond repair. His longing for attention, his envy, his lifelong sense of invisibility, all of it converged with the fantasies he'd carried since childhood. And when those fantasies finally crossed into action, the results were devastating and enduring. Cary Stayner's story offers no easy answers, living somewhere between tragedy and horror, between a damaged child and a predatory adult, between a family already scarred and the scars he would go on to create in it. In the end, we're left with a portrait of a man who spent his entire life searching for something to fill the void inside him, and instead left behind an irreversible legacy of shame and pain. No one would ever get any measure of closure in these cases, not the families of the victims and not Cary's own family. As his mother put it, quote, "Nothing ever closes, ever. It stays with you forever." Thank you for listening.
Cary was the monster in the forest. Bigfoot was never supposed to be real. And then he became that real thing.